Okay, in this video, we are going to solve radical equations. Okay, so to solve a radical equation, there's a couple steps that you want to do. The first thing is that you want to isolate the radical. Okay, that's what you want to do. The first thing you want to isolate the radical, and then apply opposite of the root to both sides. Okay, and what I mean by this is that if you had a square root, the opposite of a square root will be squaring it. So if you had the opposite of a cubed root, it will be cubing it, so on and so forth. And then the last one is solve and check. So this one you really have to check your work. Okay. All right, so once you have that written down, we'll start off with a problem. So here is my example. And what you want to do, you want to solve. You want to solve for x or n or whatever the variable is. So we're going to start off really easy. We're going to start off with square root of 5n minus 4 minus 9 equals 0. Okay. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So let's look at the first part. The first part says isolate the radical. So is the radical isolated? No, we need to move this 9 over. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So you're going to have the square root of 5n minus 4 equals 9. Okay. So now the radical is isolated. Now what you want to do is apply the opposite of the root. Okay. So the opposite of a square root is by squaring both sides. So I'm going to square both sides. And what I'm going to be left with is just the square root, and the square is going to cancel each other out. I'm left with 5n minus 4 is equal to 81. Okay. Now this is something that we can solve. Add the 4 to the other side. Okay. So 5n is going to be equal to 85. And now divide by 5 to both sides. So n is going to be equal to 17. Okay. Now how do I know if I got this right? Well, let's just check. Okay, so we're going to plug it back in here. The square root of 5 times 17 minus 4 minus 9, this should give me 0. Okay, so this is going to give me 5 times 17 is going to give me 85. Minus 4 gives me 81. Square root of 81 gives me 9. 9 minus 9 gives me 0. So that checks out. Okay. All right, not too terrible. It just looks really scary, but it's not too bad. Okay, now let's try a problem where you solve the problem, but the answer ends up not working. So let's continue to solve. So we're still solving, but I'm going to give you this problem instead. The square root of 9x minus 2 plus 1 equals 0. Okay, so first thing that we're going to do is isolate the radical. So let's move the 1 over. So you're going to have the square root of 9x minus 2 is equal to negative 1. Now at this point, some of you guys may immediately know, wait a minute, that's not correct. I can't take the square root of a number and get a negative value. Because remember, whenever you take the square root of a number, you always get a positive number. But let's say you missed that and you were on the exam and you were trying to figure everything out. So you can still do it. So the opposite of this radical would be squaring both sides. So you're going to have 9x minus 2 equals positive 1. Now I'm going to add 2 to both sides. 9x is equal to 3. Then divide by the 9. X is equal to 1/3. Okay, so basically this is what the problem says. This is the answer. Well, let's check. We got to make sure that we check this. Okay, so we're going to have square root of 9x minus 2 plus 1 equals 0. We're going to plug this in. 9 times 1/3 minus 2 plus 1 equals 0. 9, I can write it as over 1. So this is going to give me 9 times 1 gives me 9. Divided by 3 gives me 3. Minus 2 plus 1 equals 0. 3 minus 2 gives me 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Plus 1 gives me 0. 2 is not equal to 0. So actually here, there is no solution. And this is why you always want to check, because sometimes problems are going to arise where you immediately don't see the solution from the very beginning. So you always want to check your work to make sure that all the solutions are checking. Okay? All right, let's try this problem now. So let's say we wanted to do something that didn't have a square root. Let's say we had something that had like 12x minus 5 to the 1/3 power plus 8 equals 3. Okay, so let's first subtract the 8 because we need to isolate the roots, and actually the 1/3 is the root. So minus 8 to both sides. Okay, so this goes away, and I'm left with 12x minus 5 to the 1/3 power equals 3 minus 8 is going to give me -5. Now notice, this 1/3 is actually a cubed root. Can cubed roots have negative values? Yes, they can. So you can actually do these problems really easily. Okay? So now how am I going to do this problem? Well, here you have a 1/3. What is the opposite of 1/3? It's just multiplying everything by 3 over 1. That's the opposite. And remember, it's on the exponent, so it's going to be 3 over 1. Okay, so this is going to cancel each other out, and I'm left with 12x minus 5 is equal to -5 to the 3. Okay, so I'm going to have 12x minus 5. This is going to give me -125. Okay, I'm going to add the 5 to the other side. Okay, I'm going to get 12x equals -120. Okay, and then I'm going to divide by 12. That's 120 by 12. Okay, so x is going to be equal to -10 when you divide this by 12. Okay, now how do I know this is the correct answer? I got to check. Okay, so I'm going to take 12x minus 5 to the 1/3 plus 8. Is this going to give me 3? So I'm going to have 12 times -10 minus 5 to the 1/3 plus 8 equals 3. This is going to give me -120 minus 5 to the 1/3 power plus 8 equals 3. This is going to give me -125 to the 1/3 power plus 8 equals 3. Remember that to the 1/3 power is just basically the cubed root of -125 plus 8 equals 3. The cubed root of -125 is just -5 plus 8, and this actually does give me 3. So this is actually the solution. Okay? Alright, so why don't you try this next problem? Okay? So this next problem is going to be 3x minus 2 to the 1/4 equals 2. So try that one, and then we will try this one together in a little bit. Square root of x minus 2 plus 2 equals x. Okay? Alright, so let's try the first one. So the root is isolated already. I just have a 1/4, so now that's done. The opposite of 1/4 is 4 over 1. So I'm going to multiply both top and bottom by 4 over 1. Whatever I do to one side, I also have to do to the other. So this goes away. So I'm left with 3x minus 2 equals 2 to the 4 over 1, which is just 4. Okay? 2 to the 4th power is going to be 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. So I have 3x minus 2 equals 16. I'm going to add by 2. So I'm left with 3x equals 18. And then finally, just divide by 3. So x is equal to 6. Okay, and I'll give you, I'll let you check this on your own. Okay, now here's the last problem. The first thing that we want to do is let's move the 2 so that we can isolate the square root. So I'm going to move the 2 over. So I have the square root of x minus 2 is equal to x minus 2. Alright, well, we came into a little problem. Well, what are we going to do here? Well, let's square both sides. Now, we can only apply one square to each side. So if I apply a square here, I cannot do it to this individual one. You have to apply it to the whole thing. Okay? The square root is going to cancel out the square. So you're left with x minus 2 equals x minus 2 squared. Okay, so now here it doesn't seem like we really did anything. What else can we do? Well, this tells me that there's two of these things. So I have x minus 2 equals x minus 2 times x minus 2. Okay, and now let's FOIL everything out. So x minus 2 equals x squared minus 2x minus 2x plus 4. Okay, so we're going to have x minus 2 equals x squared minus 4x plus 4. Okay, now whenever you see a square like this, and we're going to do problems like this later on in the next chapter, what you want to do is you want to set these equal to 0, and you'll see why. So let me move the x over so I can combine some like terms. So negative 2 equals x squared. This is going to give me a negative 5x plus 4, and then I'm going to add this 2 over. So I'm going to get 0 is equal to x squared minus 5x plus 6. At this point is where you have to factor. And if you forgot how to factor, it's okay. In the next chapter, we're going to do a lot of factoring. So basically what you want to do is you want to think of two numbers that multiply to get 6 and add up to get negative 5. Okay, so in that case, two numbers that multiply to get 6 and add up to get negative 5. Well, 3 and 2 are really good candidates, right? Because 3 times 2 is going to give me 6. But is any of the combinations going to give me a negative 5? Well, if I make both of them negative, negative 3 plus negative 2 is going to give me negative 5. Negative 3 times negative 2 is going to give me positive 6. So this is going to be a minus 3. This is going to be a minus 2. Okay, now we're going to break this up. X minus 3 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. So x equals 3 and x equals 2. Okay. Now, if you didn't quite get that, it's okay. Not a problem. We will do problems like this later. So it was a little factoring. It is an introduction to factoring because we will be doing a lot of factoring later. But for right now, if you didn't quite get this problem, it's okay. We will do more videos on these.